He's spent over 30 years in the clinic and on the field, supporting both pro athletes and weekend warriors. Now, sports physiotherapist and Coreshorts creator Greg Bay is taking you inside the locker room with the show Injuries, Innovations, and Insights.
Greetings, everybody. My name's Greg Bay, and welcome to another podcast of Injuries, Innovations, and Insights. Today, we have a very special guest with us. Our guest is a Canadian Physio Association lifetime member. He is the first recipient of the Golden Hands Award, and he's also a chartered member in the UK of the Physiotherapy Society. Today, our special guest is a 53-year practicing physiotherapist veteran. His name, Cliff Flowler. Cliff, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Greg.
So it's an amazing history. It's an amazing legacy. When we talk about innovation in our profession, the first person I think of is you as being so creative, not only in your teachings and the amount of knowledge that you've accumulated, but also in your ability to take a look at something and try to be original in providing a different set of thinking towards it. And then, of course, going out and practice. But right now, I'd really like to find out how you got interested in the physiotherapy field. Let's take us back to some of your younger days. Where did you grow up, and how did you get interested in physiotherapy?
I grew up in Birmingham for my first 11 years, and then Yorkshire and then onwards. But I was born in Yorkshire.
So you're a UK guy through and through?
Afraid so.
So tell me what got you interested in physiotherapy.
Our school, when I was 14, went to a local hospital to show occupations within the hospital. And I happened to get interested in the physiotherapy department. And the more I looked at it, I thought, that's what I want to do.
Well, I'll tell you, we're all the better for it, that's for sure. And you ended up going to physiotherapy school, and you graduated in 1959, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
So what happened after that? Where did you go? What did you do?
Well, I joined the army to do physiotherapy because the only males couldn't get into physiotherapy in Civvy Street at that time. There was only females that could. So all the males had to join the forces. So the Army, the Air Force and the Navy all had courses, ran their own programs. So I joined the Army to do physiotherapy.
Wow. And I mean, that's amazing, especially, we go back in time, there was a separation between some of the education processes, right?
Yes, there was.
Yeah. And when you got out and you're with the Army, where did you go? Where did you go from there?
Well, in the Army, I was in Germany for 4 years and Malaya for 2 years. And then I came out in 1964 and got a job in a local hospital, less pay than I was in the Army, which didn't go down too good, but never mind. And I started there, and then while I was there, a manual therapy course came up. And fortunately, I was one of 6 people that managed to get on it.
Wow. So the early days, what was the manual therapy course? Who was involved with that?
The manual therapy course was the first one run by the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy in 1965. The course was run by Syriacs, who was the main lecturer on the course, but also Alan Stoddard, Greg Grieve, who was a physiotherapist, ex-Navy, Jenny Hickling, who was a physiotherapist and a chief therapist in Syriacs's private practice.
Wow, so certainly those names for most of us are part of certainly the volumes of information that we've read through at times and have provided a great foundation for the rest of us to learn from, right?
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. So you're on this course in manual therapy, you're in England. how did you ever end up in Canada?
Oh, well, first of all, the course was so good, it changed my life right there. Bump. But I couldn't stand the wages at the moment. I was married with 2 children, and I just couldn't do it. So I decided that, well, I decided, and then my wife agreed, that we'd go to Canada. So we did. As not only me, but quite a few others from the Army came as well.
And where did you first land when you got here?
We landed in Toronto and then caught the train up to North Bay, Ontario, where I had a job as superintendent up there. And that was good. I like North Bay.
So that was your first introduction to Canada with your wife Pat and your 2 boys was up in North Bay,
Ontario.
Yeah. So what was the progress after that? Did you head back to Toronto, and then how did it go?
Well, what happened was Syriax, unknown to me, had got in touch with Helen de Gort, who was the principal of the Montreal school. And she got in touch with me and asked me if I'd like to come down and give a lecture. I'd never given a lecture in my life at the time. I was frightened to death, but I went anyway. And then I decided that I was a bit cut off in North Bay, so I would have to get into a bigger city. So as a new hospital had been built in Toronto, and it hadn't opened yet. It was called Scarborough Centenary Hospital, and this was in 1967, and that's when it actually opened. So I applied for the job of chief therapist and was fortunate enough to get it, and I stayed there for about a year before I decided to go on to private practice.
And at that time, some of your colleagues from the UK were over.
That is correct.
So who was over, and you decided to come west, right?
Yeah. Well, 2 weeks prior to me coming over, Blair Farish came over, and he was chief therapist in Sarnia. In 1967, Jim McGregor came over, and he was a chief therapist in Kingston Hotel Jew. And then in 1968, Dave Lamb came over, and he was teaching at the University of Kingston. So there was quite a few of us that came at that time.
All with a military or sort of the UK military background?
Yes, and we'd all done manual therapy courses.
So at that time, you ended up then heading to Red Deer, right?
Well, before that, though, the other person who came in in 1967 was John Oldham, coming in from New Zealand. And we got together fairly quickly, and we brought Stan Parrish to Toronto at that time. And then we went on to go into private practice, as I said, in Red Deer.
Yeah.
And Dave Lamb and myself decided to go in partnership, and that's what we did.
Wow. So then that was that in the early 70s then?
We arrived in Red Deer in 1969.
69.
Yeah.
Yeah. And tell me a little bit about this course in 1971.
Oh, the 1971. It was the North American doctors it's called the North American Medicine, Manipulative Medicine Group, decided to put on a seminar at Banff, Alberta.
Okay.
And in that seminar, John Oldham, Dave Lamb, and myself were asked to be the assistants to John Manell, who was teaching the course.
John Manell,
he was a doctor. He wrote the book Joint Play, and basically it was on not so much on the spine. It was mostly on peripheral joints and manipulation of peripheral joints.
Right. And is it Dr. John Manel? What was his background?
Dr. John Manel was the son of James Manel, who was the guy as far as physical medicine prior to Syriax.
Right, right.
And he wrote 2 books, which were very famous at the time. One was on the spine and one was on the periphery.
Well, yeah, some of the real beginnings of a lot of the information for manual therapy there, right?
Yeah, that was 1932 when he wrote them books.
Later on, when we do our segment 2, when we follow up, I actually think I've got that book from your library. So
I bet you haven't.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Do
you still have it?
I think Diane Lee's got it.
Oh, Diane's got it?
Yeah.
Oh, my. Well, so, and then, so that's really cool. So you're on the course, you're asked to assist. So you're getting involved in education, you're getting involved in teaching at a more formal level.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's talk the Canary Islands, 1973.
1973. Well, prior to 1973, we wanted to get an orthopedic group together and teach our course and have an exam. We approached the CPA with this information, and they were all for it. And they were having exams at iFOMT, and we said if we passed the exams, all the exams, we could then start the orthopedic course off. So there was no grandfathering in. Right. And that's what we did.
So that was really the beginning of formulating the manual therapy, or really the orthopedic division of CPA, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Wow. So you had CPA's blessing to go down there and not only do the courses, but complete the exam so you guys can come back and set it up.
Set the orthopedic group up, or get help setting it up anyway, and doing an exam situation. But it takes a long time to do that.
Yeah. So who was all down in the Canary Islands from Canada? Like who are some of the people that were there with you?
Okay, well, there was Dr. Farney from Vancouver. There was an orthopedic surgeon. And then we had Dr. Boak from Red Deer, Alberta, who was a physician, but was also on the committee of the manual medicine group, as far as the doctors were concerned. As far as the physiotherapists were, there was obviously John and Dave, Therese Lord, Jenny Correa from Ontario. I can't remember them.
Oh boy, that's fine. That's amazing.
There was I think 7 of us altogether, seven or 8 of us altogether.
And who were the instructors there and the examiners?
Well, the instructors was Syriax, Stoddard, Hinton. They were all doctors, Hinton being a doctor from Germany. Mm-hmm. And then we had Freddie Cartenborn, who was also instructing the clinical stuff, and Olaf Evgener. And on one of these, there's another doctor from the States, a person by the name of Goody, Dr. Goody, who went on then to do quite a lot of manual medicine.
So it really was the foundation of what the Canadian gang could bring back. And then you formulated a group, I would imagine, to figure out how to develop your courses plus the examination process.
Yeah, that's correct. We decided that we wanted to be a little different because there was a bit of a disagreement between the groups from the different countries on what to teach and what not to teach on their courses. And the problem came in basically not with manipulation, but the word mobilization, where there was 2 distinct followings. One from the Norwegian groups, which said mobilization, you had to be at the end of the joint, motion. where the Maitland group was the mobility was before the end range by using neural nerve endings.
Well, I mean, I think that even today there's not so much controversy, but different trains of thought in that, not only from a manual therapy point of view, but a possibility through the chiropractors, and then also, the osteopathic sort of direction seems to be picking up again as well. But collectively, all manual therapists.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty cool. And so you had your group, which was it Dave Lamb, yourself, John Oldham? Who else was involved in creating the courses in the first exams?
In the first exam, probably us three, actually.
Yeah.
I can't think of anybody other than us three for the first on the teaching courses before that.
Well, on this show about innovation, there you go. We've got, the innovation part of creating something new with a synthesis of information from a number of, at that time, specialists around the world, because you tapped into physiotherapists, you tapped into physicians, and you tapped into osteopaths, and you even had some chiropractic influence as well, didn't you?
Only by speech,
right?
Not exactly courses.
By courses, yeah. I mean, it was really still a developing time in trying to formulate a lot of the information, right?
Yeah. Well, osteopaths were a lot more forthcoming than the chiropractors. Mm-hmm. They kept things pretty close, and they didn't teach much to anybody outside of their own profession.
Right.
Where the osteopaths were not like that at all. They taught a lot. And Fred Mitchell Jr., where we got all the teachers to go to his courses, and we did 3 courses with him. Muscle energy was excellent.
So you really did gather information from different groups then?
Yes, we did.
Yeah. So tell me about the first course. You put was it a 3-month course that you put on in order to sort of get the synthesis of information for the extremities and the spine? How did that work?
I would have to check on that. I've been thinking about that, but I just have to check on that with a few people. The first 3-month course the first courses wasn't the 3-month course. They were week courses and sometimes 2-week courses on all the different things. So the first exam, it wasn't what we ended up with. Mm-hmm. The next exam, the second exam, was taught by the 3-month course, taught by Earl Petman, who happened to be on the first course and passed.
So Earl was on the first course.
First group and passed, and passed very well, actually. And he's obviously a brilliant clinician and teacher and everything else. So, so he's been a super guy. Yeah, you taught with him for so many years, didn't you? Well, odds and ends. Well, it's interesting that the development of that then created, or at least captured, the minds of Earl Petman, who went on to, of course, just retire recently, but to write a book and be an author and be a real colleague of gathering information. But also in that first course, there was a few other people, right? Yeah, I think Alan Morgan was on that. No, Alan wasn't on that course, sorry. Oh, on the course there was a couple of brilliant people on that course. Diane Lee was on that course, and she was a phenom. And she went on, obviously, to write lots of books. She was, everything you can say about a person was Diane Lee. Yeah. She wrote many books. She's taught thousands of people. She's worldwide known. She's terrific. Yeah. Well, she sure is. And, I've been riding your coattails for a number of years in the sense of being able just to have the presence to be around you a lot. So I've been able to connect with so many of these minds that
that you've connected with, and certainly opened some of the door to the ability to move things forward. And I think that as a mentor, that's one of the things that's really special about your career, is that you've always taken a stance to be able to move people forward, in particular with their thinking. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. Now, you also put on some courses, sponsored some courses, even in Vancouver, when you made your way to Abbotsford here, where you've been home since when, 1972?
Yes.
Yeah. So you brought in Dr. Stiles and
Dr. Stiles, osteopath from Oklahoma.
Yeah.
He's one of the osteopathic bright boys. He was very, very good. First time I met him, actually, I had an invitation to go to Stan Paris's clinic in Atlanta, and the group of therapists he'd got, and he'd got Stiles coming in for 3 or 4 days. I'd never heard of the person before, but went down there, thoroughly enjoyed the course, very, very good. I was so happy with the course that when I got back, the first thing I did was set up a course in Vancouver. And he came twice, actually. So it was very good.
Well, it is about being able to gain knowledge from the ability to not only listen and read, but then synthesize the information yourself so that you can become a better educator. You taught in the Canadian and the US system for so many years, as well as chief examiner for the Canadian system, and down in the States too, right?
Yeah, I did both.
Yeah.
The North American Institute, I was a senior faculty member, but I wasn't involved in putting the North American Institute together. That was basically Earl Pettman and a group of Earl Pettman, and Dave Lamb was in that too, and a group of American therapists.
Well, that whole ability to stretch yourself, both in your taking a risk in putting something together and presenting it, but the morphous of the change that's occurred over the last 40 years has been phenomenal. But the change only occurs because of the ability for people to move forward with their thinking, for the ability to match not only the science and the evidence, but then also to keep asking the questions that haven't been asked. And one of the things that, we talk about innovation, one of the things that you continue to do is have a real keen interest in learning. So here you are after a 53-year career and been retired for a few years. What articles are you reading these days?
Usually anything to do with doctors and different conditions doctors face. Not so much anatomy and neurology, except a little bit on the cranial nerves now and again.
Right. Yes, that's right. Well, it always it still gets me excited because of the conversations that we can have, and then how to manipulate the conversations into asking more questions. And I think that that's probably one of the key aspects in your teachings, is that you really tried to open people's brains up so that they become a better problem solver.
Yeah, I hope to.
Yeah, well, and you're always doing problem solving, aren't you?
Try.
Yeah. For those people that know Cliff, they know what he's talking about. And if you don't know Cliff, you'll know that some of the most difficult puzzles that you'll see are being done by him still, which not only is an active brain, but he has the ability to look inside out from both sides. As the Bernstein Bear said, inside, upside, inside, outside, upside down. Sometimes I find your brain working all 4 of those at once. So it's amazing. What we'd like to do is just talk a little bit now. You're offered to write a chapter in Greg Grieve's first edition of Modern Manual Therapy. And I know that there was a big British Columbia contingent for that. But how was that writing that chapter in the book?
Difficult. It's not my forte. It took a long time.
Well, it was terrific, and of course in that book, Earl and I believe Diane had some work, and Dave Lamb, and certainly that went on to then get edited and turned into the second edition as well, and it was amazing. And so Greg Grieve, he was a good friend.
Yes, very good friend.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about Greg Grieve.
Greg Grieve was he went in the Navy to do his physiotherapy, came out of the Navy, and then got his teacher's certificate in physiotherapy. Went to physiotherapy in many places. One of them was St. Thomas's, where he got involved with celiacs, and then he applied for a supervisory position at St. Nicholas Hospital in London, and when he left there, I took his job over. And he went then to teach at West Middlesex Hospital, and he was the main leader of the clinical aspect of the 3-month course, first 3-month course.
Wow. Well, it's everything gets started from somewhere, but when you've got such high quality references and again, the innovators to put it together and to make it make sense so that other people can come along and expand their brains and also their hands, because in the end, manual therapy is about putting your hands on people for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So Cliff, at this stage, what I'd like to do is, and for all our listeners, is take a little break. So what we're going to do is have 2 podcasts. Our next podcast that will follow will be section 2 with one of the Canadian godfathers of manual therapy, Cliff Flowler. We will resume this conversation, and we will take it from some of the exciting times of developing the orthopedic division and the exam process and education process, and we'll bring you a little more up to date. So we hope you enjoyed this session, meeting Cliff and getting introduced to some of where he is, but most importantly, where he came from. And stay tuned for the next podcast as we are able to continue our conversation on right here on Injuries, Innovations, and Insights. I'm Greg Bay. I'm your host, and we look forward to the next podcast coming right up with Cliff Flowler. Thank you very much, everybody.